Nigeria has one of the largest economies in Africa. It has been predominantly based on the petroleum industry since the late 1960s. Since 1973, a succession of global oil price increases has resulted in substantial economic expansion in transportation, building, industry, and government services. Because of the enormous inflow of rural people into greater urban areas, agricultural production slowed to the point where cash crops like palm oil, peanuts, and cotton were no longer substantial export commodities. Furthermore, beginning about 1975, Nigeria was compelled to import basic commodities such as rice and cassava for local consumption. Before we get into how Nigeria will become rich, first let's analyze some trade data and the agriculture, forestry, and fishing sectors. Nigeria possesses abundant arable land, but a severe shortage of farmland exists in densely populated regions, such as the southeastern states and the areas around Kano, Katsina, and Sokoto. This scarcity has led to significant migrations by Igbo, Ibibio, and Hausa communities. Cultural traditions, like the prohibition against selling family land, further restrict land access in certain areas with apparent cultivable land. Desertification in the north has also limited available land. A substantial portion of Nigeria's population, over 70%, depends on agriculture for their livelihoods. Most are small-scale subsistence farmers who rely on hand tools like hoes and machetes. Challenges including land scarcity, poor storage facilities, limited transport infrastructure, and insufficient investment capital hamper agricultural productivity. Despite government initiatives, the food deficit worsens due to rapid population growth and urbanization. Food crops like yams, taro, and cassava dominate the south, while the drier north relies on grains like sorghum, millet, cowpeas, and maize, with rice also playing a significant role. Industrial crops such as oil palm, cacao, and rubber are produced in the south, while peanuts and cotton are northern staples. In 1982, the government disbanded produce marketing boards to encourage tree crop cultivation. Efforts to alleviate food shortages involved direct food distribution and encouraging urban gardening. Livestock raising, particularly sheep, pigs, and goats, were underdeveloped in Nigeria. Cattle herding by the Fulani remains the primary source of beef, though meat consumption lags behind Western levels. Nigeria's forests are threatened by deforestation due to farming practices, hunting, and demand for fuel wood, particularly in densely populated and arid areas. Forest reserves and plantations have been established to combat this trend. Fishing has grown in importance as a food source due to recurring droughts in the Sahel, with domestic catches meeting over half of the fish demand, primarily sourced from Lake Chad and the southern coastal waters, as well as seasonal river pools in the north. Nigeria's domestic trade in staple foods primarily flows north-south, linking different ecological zones and major urban centers in the southeast and southwest. Southern states supply products like plantains, cassava, kola nuts, and fruits to the north, which reciprocates with beans, onions, and livestock. Yams from the central region find markets in both southern and far northern cities, demonstrating a dynamic interplay of agricultural products. Local markets, street vendors, and small neighborhood shops serve as key avenues for the sale of food items and manufactured goods. On the international front, Nigeria's major exports, including crude oil, cocoa beans, and rubber, find destinations in countries like India, the United States, and the European Union. Conversely, the nation imports machinery, transport equipment, manufactured goods, chemicals, and food, mainly from the EU, China, and the United States. Nigeria's trade history has seen shifts from deficits to surpluses and back. Initially facing a trade deficit at independence, revenue from crude oil exports led to surpluses in the late 1960s. However, the mid-1970s saw the return of deficits, influenced by global oil market fluctuations and government spending decisions. Trade balances remained unpredictable, with a surplus in 1980 supporting projects like Abuja's development, but turning into a deficit by 1982. The country's external debt interest further complicated its trade dynamics in the 21st century, emphasizing the importance of debt relief for a truly favorable trade balance. Nigeria's mining sector was relatively small compared to its vast potential. The sector had not been fully developed or tapped into its abundant mineral resources. Nigeria is known to have significant reserves of various minerals, including solid minerals like tin, limestone, coal, gold, lead, zinc, and others, as well as oil and natural gas. The Nigerian government had been making efforts to promote the growth of the mining sector and attract investment to unlock its potential. Initiatives such as the Nigerian Mining and Minerals Act of 2007 and the establishment of the Nigeria Mining Cadastre Office were aimed at streamlining the sector and providing a conducive environment for mining activities. However, the sector faced various challenges, including inadequate infrastructure, regulatory hurdles, security concerns in some mining regions, and a lack of funding for exploration and development. These challenges had hindered the sector's growth and prevented it from reaching its full potential. Between 2010 and 2020, the oil industry was responsible for 8.8% of the gross domestic product, and it supplied around 60% of the income to the government over the same period. Recent decreases in revenue have led to a rise in the deficit, which will result in an increase in the public debt from 27.6% of GDP in 2019 to 35% in 2021. The COVID-19 epidemic has made the revenue situation far worse, and the sustainability of the government's finances has emerged as a key risk for the country's long-term economic growth. When various parts of Nigeria's economic development and related metrics are examined more closely, it becomes clear that the country faces significant issues. First, despite having the largest economy on the continent, Nigeria's per capita income only ranks 18th in all of Africa. This is an indicator of the prosperity, or lack thereof, of the people as well as the contributions of citizens to the riches of the nation, and it is not only the consequence of the sheer quantity of the population. An increase in Nigeria's GDP per capita is possible if the country's workforce is trained better and the country's technical infrastructure is brought up to speed. Second, because its economy is driven primarily by the extractive sector, Nigeria has inherent rigidities when it comes to the absorption of labor in the national economy. This is due to the fact that extractive industries are by their very definition capital-intensive and produce a comparatively low number of job possibilities. Third, since the economy of Nigeria is so dependent on natural capital and the export of raw or unprocessed commodities, it is vulnerable to the ups and downs that are caused by shocks from the outside world, whether those shocks be economic, political, or health-related. Nigeria, endowed with abundant natural resources, notably oil, has the potential to exponentially grow its economy by expanding its export base and reducing corruption. The nation's heavy reliance on oil exports has made its economy vulnerable to fluctuations in global oil prices. To mitigate this risk and foster long-term prosperity, diversification is crucial. By focusing on manufacturing and sectors such as agriculture, technology, and services, Nigeria can broaden its export portfolio. A diverse export base not only enhances economic resilience, but also creates jobs, attracts foreign investments, and stimulates innovation.